After Keanu Reeves found a lonely girl buying diapers at Walmart and brought this young one and her little brother to the authorities, he thought the worst was over. But soon he would uncover the true struggles these children were facing and reveal the haunting truth behind their mother's neglect. Before we dive into part 2 of this incredible story, leave a comment where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed softly, casting harsh shadows across the tired faces of those present. The wall clock read 1:15 a.m. as Keanu Reeves stepped through the glass doors, following two groups of officers. The night air clung to him, a stark contrast to the sterile environment inside. Ahead of him, the first group of officers escorted a black woman with intricate braided hair and a white man with long blonde hair reaching his shoulders. Keanu recognized them as the mother of the children he had helped earlier that evening and her boyfriend. They were being led toward the booking area, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. The second group guided two small children, a 5-year-old girl and an 18-month-old boy, toward a separate room. Keanu had learned their names were Lila and June. An officer mentioned they would be meeting with a child welfare worker there. As Keanu followed the children and their escort down the corridor, his eyes remained fixed on the booking area. He watched the methodical processing of the mother and her boyfriend. Officers verified their information, asking for names, dates of birth, and addresses. The electronic fingerprinting machine whirred softly as it captured their prints, and the flash of the camera punctuated the air as mugshots were taken. Catherine Holson, date of birth September 15, 1996, an officer called out, reading from a form. Keanu's brow furrowed. 28 years old, so young to be the mother of two, he thought. The realization added another layer to the tragedy unfolding before him. As they entered the separate room, a woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor stood to greet them. "Hello, I'm Rachel Nennes, the child welfare worker assigned to this case," she said, her voice gentle but authoritative. The room provided a stark contrast to the harsh booking area. Soft, muted colors adorned the walls, and comfortable furniture was arranged to create a welcoming atmosphere despite the institutional setting. Keanu settled onto a leather sofa beside the children, his presence offering silent support. Rachel began, "I've been briefed by the police while we were waiting for your arrival." She paused, her eyes moving from Keanu to the children. "We have some difficult decisions to make regarding the children's immediate future." The atmosphere grew heavy with the weight of her words. Lila, her small face etched with worry, looked up at Rachel. In broken English, she asked the question that hung in the air. "Mom going jail?" The innocence of her inquiry emphasized the gravity of the situation they all faced. Rachel knelt down to Lila's level, her voice soft and reassuring. "The police are going to help your mom, sweetie. They'll decide what's best for everyone." Keanu found himself becoming the grounding presence in the room. He gently placed a hand on Lila's shoulder, offering comfort to both her and the little boy who clung to his sister. As the night wore on, the reality of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. The children, exhausted from the evening's events, leaned against Keanu, their small bodies warm against his side. He found himself wondering how a simple trip to the store had led to this moment, forever changing the lives of these young children and their troubled mother. Rachel Nennes settled into a chair across from the children, her demeanor professional, yet compassionate. "Lila, sweetie," she began gently, "I need to ask you some questions about your home. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like living with your mum?" Lila, her small frame dwarfed by the large sofa, nodded hesitantly. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper as she began to speak. "Mommy goes away sometimes, for lots of days." Rachel leaned in, her voice encouraging. "Can you tell me more about that? What happens when Mommy goes away?" Lila's brow furrowed in concentration. "She goes for 2-3 days. Sometimes she comes back with different men, but mostly with Dennis." Keanu felt a pang in his chest at the matter-of-fact way Lila described her mother's absences. He glanced at Rachel, whose face remained neutral, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. "I see," Rachel said softly. "And what about tonight, Lila? Can you tell me what happened when you went to Walmart alone?" Lila's eyes brightened slightly, as if proud to explain her actions. "I go get diapers for June. Dennis showed me how." Rachel's eyebrows raised slightly. "Dennis taught you how to go to Walmart by yourself?" Lila nodded. "One night when Mommy was away, Dennis said, 'I'm a big girl and can do it.'" The casualness with which Lila described these adult responsibilities sent a chill through Keanu. He watched as Rachel carefully noted this information, her pen moving swiftly across her notepad. "Lila," Rachel continued, her voice gentle but probing, "has anyone ever hurt you or June? Physically, I mean." Lila's face scrunched up in thought. "Mommy never hits us, but she's sad a lot. And angry. She doesn't smile much anymore." The little girl paused, her eyes downcast. "Dennis sometimes, Mommy doesn't stop him." Keanu felt his jaw clench at this revelation. He looked at Rachel, whose professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of anger before she composed herself. "Thank you for telling me that, Lila," Rachel said softly. "You're very brave." As the questioning continued, Lila's eyes began to droop with exhaustion. She looked up at Keanu, hope shining in her tired eyes. "Can we stay with you?" she asked, her voice small and pleading. "Me and June, we don't want to be apart." Keanu felt his heart constrict. He gently explained, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I wish I could take you home, but I have other responsibilities. We're going to find a safe place for both of you, though. I promise." Rachel nodded, adding, "We'll need to arrange emergency foster care while we sort out the legal aspects of your mother's case, but we'll do our best to keep you and June together." As the reality of their situation settled in, Keanu found himself marveling at the resilience of these young children. Despite the neglect and hardship they had endured, there was still a spark of hope in Lila's eyes. He silently vowed to do whatever he could to help them find a better future. The weight of the night's events hung heavy in the air as Keanu turned to Rachel, his voice low with concern. "How long will the children need to stay in emergency foster care?" Rachel's expression was somber as she began to explain the complexities of the situation. "Cases like this are never simple," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Given the evidence of long-term neglect, there's a possibility that Catherine could lose her parental rights. If the police find any evidence of drug distribution or more severe neglect charges, we could be looking at rehabilitation or even jail time for her." Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the situation. His mind raced, considering options. Suddenly an idea struck him. "I serve as a donor for an orphanage," he began, his voice carrying a note of hope. "It's a well-funded facility with excellent care. Would it be possible to transfer the children there immediately, at least for tonight?" Rachel's eyebrows raised with interest. "That could be a good option. Can you provide me with the name and address?" Keanu promptly provided the details for Sunnybrook Children's Home, situated just outside the city. While Rachel started handling the required paperwork, Keanu shifted his focus to the children. Lila had nestled against him, her eyes drooping with fatigue, while June had already dozed off, resting on the arm of the sofa. "It's going to be okay," Keanu murmured softly, more to himself than to the children. "We're going to find you a safe place to rest tonight." As they waited for the paperwork to be completed, Lila stirred, her small voice barely above a whisper. "My teddy bear," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I forgot my teddy bear." Keanu leaned in, his voice gentle. "Can you tell me about your teddy bear, Lila?" The little girl sniffled. "Daddy gave it to me before he went away. I can't sleep without it." The simple request carried the weight of Lila's last connection to a happier past. Keanu felt his heart ache for the child. "I'll see what I can do," he promised, carefully extricating himself from the children. "You stay here with Rachel, okay? Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back." As Keanu stepped out of the room, he found himself marveling at how deeply invested he had become in these children's lives in just a few short hours. The teddy bear request, so small in the grand scheme of things, felt monumental in its importance. He was determined to do whatever he could to bring a small measure of comfort to Lila and June in the midst of their world turning upside down. Keanu made his way through the bustling police station, searching for an officer assigned to the Holson case. He spotted a detective he recognized from earlier in the evening and approached him. "Excuse me," Keanu began, his voice low and urgent. "I need to ask a favor regarding the Holson children." The detective turned, surprise registering on his face at Keanu's presence. "Mr. Reeves, what can I do for you?" Keanu quickly explained Lila's request for her teddy bear. "I know it might seem trivial, but it's important to her. Is there any way we could recover it from their home?" The detective's expression softened. "We actually still have a team processing the scene. I can radio them and ask them to look for the bear in the children's room. It shouldn't be a problem." Keanu felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, I can't tell you how much this will mean to Lila." The detective nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's the least we can do. I'll have someone bring it to the station as soon as they find it." As Keanu turned to leave, the detective called after him. "Mr. Reeves, it's good to see someone caring so much about these kids. They need all the support they can get." Keanu nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He made his way back to the social worker's room, where Rachel had completed the necessary documentation for the children's transfer to Sunnybrook Children's Home. "The children are asking if you'll come with us to the orphanage," Rachel said as Keanu entered the room. "Sure I will," Keanu answered instantly. "But how about Teddy Bear?" Lila asked, her small voice trembling, eyes wide with worry. "Teddy's scared. He not know where I go." Keanu crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "The officers are looking for it in your home, Lila. They'll call me as soon as they find him. I promise I'll bring Teddy to you, okay? But for now, we need to go to the orphanage. Can you be brave for me?" Lila hesitated, clutching at Keanu's shirt. "Teddy need me brave." Keanu smiled softly, brushing a strand of her hair back. "Yes, Teddy would want you to be very brave so he knows where to find you." Lila nodded reluctantly, her lip quivering but her small hands finally letting go. Rachel cleared her throat, her tone gentle but serious. "Before we leave, there's a chance for the children to see their mother, but only from afar. She's still being processed by the police." Keanu looked at Rachel and then back at Lila and June. "Do you want to see your mom even just for a moment?" Lila's face brightened slightly. "Mommy there, I see Mommy." Keanu stood and carried June, who was still half asleep, while holding Lila's hand. Rachel led them down a quiet hallway to a room with a one-way window. On the other side, Catherine sat with her hands cuffed in front of her, surrounded by officers. "Just a moment," Rachel whispered. "She can't see you up close, but you can see her." As they approached the window, Lila pressed her small hand against the glass, her face lighting up when she spotted Catherine. "Mommy," she said softly, waving with her free hand. Catherine turned her head sharply at the movement, her eyes locking on Keanu and the children. Her expression shifted from shock to sorrow, her lips trembling as tears welled up. She lifted her cuffed hands slightly as though wanting to reach for them. Lila smiled innocently and waved again. "Mommy, we goin'. See Teddy soon," she called out, her voice muffled through the glass. Catherine's shoulders sagged as she visibly fought back sobs, her gaze lingering on her children, her anguish clear. Rachel gently placed a hand on Lila's shoulder. "It's time to go now," she said softly, glancing at Keanu. "I'm sorry they can't speak with her yet, but I can arrange for a visit tomorrow." Keanu nodded, his heart heavy as he turned away from the window with the children. Lila glanced back one last time, her small face pressed into Keanu's chest as they walked down the hall. "Mommy's sad," she murmured. Keanu tightened his hold on her. "She's just tired, sweetheart, but we'll see her again soon, I promise." Rachel walked ahead, her voice soft as she spoke. "I'll make sure tomorrow's visit happens. For now, let's get them settled." Keanu followed, silently vowing to keep his promises to these children, no matter how difficult the road ahead. "My car's outside if you'd like to use it." Rachel smiled gratefully. "That would be perfect. I'll just need to install the car seats." They made their way to Keanu's car, Rachel expertly installing the car seats while Keanu gently the children. As they settled in for the hour-long drive to Sunnybrook, Keanu found himself lost in thought, the quiet of the night broken only by the children's sobs in the back seat. Rachel's voice broke through his reverie. "You know, it's not often we see someone get this involved in a case like this, especially not a celebrity." Keanu glanced at her, then back at the road. "I couldn't just walk away," he said softly. "Not when I saw what was happening." Rachel nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You've made a real difference tonight, Mr. Reeves. These children won't forget it." The journey to Sunnybrook Children's Home had taken just over an hour, but to Keanu, it felt like an eternity. In the back seat, Lila and June slumbered peacefully, their small forms secured in car seats that Rachel had meticulously installed before their departure. Rachel herself had dozed off in the passenger seat, the weight of the night's events finally taking its toll. As they approached their destination, Keanu found his mind wandering, replaying the events that had led to this moment. How strange, he mused, that a simple trip to the store could spiral into something so profound, so life-altering. The soft breathing of the children in the back seat served as a gentle reminder of the responsibility he had inadvertently taken on. The night had deepened when they pulled up to Sunnybrook. The chirping of crickets filled the quiet air, a soft melody against the stillness of the night. The building, a large Victorian-style house, stood silent and imposing in the early morning light. As Keanu carefully lifted the still sleeping Lila from her car seat, the front door creaked open, spilling warm golden light onto the porch and welcoming them into the unknown. As they approached the front door, it swung open, spilling warm light onto the porch. A man in his early 50s stepped out, his salt-and-pepper hair slightly disheveled, suggesting he had been roused from sleep. Despite this, his face creased into a warm smile as he recognized Keanu. "Keanu, my friend," he called softly, mindful of the sleeping children. "I must say I didn't expect to see you at this hour." Keanu nodded in greeting, his voice low. "Ethan, thank you for accommodating us on such short notice. I know it's an unusual situation." Ethan's eyes moved from Keanu to Rachel, who was cradling the still sleeping June, and then back to the children. His expression softened further, a mix of concern and compassion crossing his features. Of course," he murmured. "Come in, it's cold outside. Let's get these little ones settled." They stepped into the entrance hall, the warm glow of a table lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. The house was quiet, the other children still fast asleep in their beds. Ethan led them past the main living areas, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. "I've prepared a small private bedroom for them," Ethan explained in hushed tones as they climbed the stairs. "I thought they might feel more comfortable there, at least for tonight. We can introduce them to the other children tomorrow, once they've had a chance to settle in a bit." Keanu felt a wave of gratitude for Ethan's thoughtfulness. It was clear that the man understood the delicate nature of their situation, the trauma these children had endured. As they reached the top of the stairs, Ethan guided them down a hallway lined with framed children's artwork, a touching reminder of the lives that found shelter within these walls. The room Ethan had prepared was small but cozy, with 2 twin beds adorned with colorful quilts. A nightlight cast a soft, comforting glow, and a shelf lined with children's books stood against one wall. It was clear that every effort had been made to create a welcoming, non-threatening environment for the children. Keanu gently laid Lila on one of the beds, carefully extracting his arm from beneath her. For a moment all seemed well, the little girl settling into the soft mattress with a small sigh. But as Keanu attempted to straighten up, Lila's eyes flew open, panic clear on her face. "No!" she cried, her arms shooting out to wrap around Keanu's neck. "Don't leave me!" The sudden outburst startled June awake, and soon both children were crying, their small bodies racked with sobs. The peaceful silence of moments ago shattered, replaced by a cacophony of fear and confusion. "Shh, it's okay," Keanu soothed, his voice gentle as he tried to calm Lila. But the little girl was inconsolable, her grip on him tightening with each attempt to reassure her. Rachel stepped in, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos. "Lila, sweetheart, you're safe here. Mr. Reeves isn't leaving you forever. We're all here to help you." But Lila was beyond reason. her cries growing louder. Keanu felt helpless, torn between the need to comfort the child and the knowledge that he couldn't stay indefinitely. He looked to Ethan and Rachel, desperation clear in his eyes. Just then his phone rang, the sound cutting through the children's cries. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was the police station. The timing couldn't have been worse, but he knew he had to take the call. "I have to take this," he said apologetically to Rachel, who nodded and moved to take his place comforting Lila. As Keanu stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him, he could still hear the muffled sounds of the children's distress. He leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath before answering the call. Little did he know that the news he was about to receive would add yet another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. The detective's voice on the other end of the line was tense, urgent. "Mr. Reeves, there's been a development. Catherine Holson has suffered a medical emergency at the station." Keanu felt his stomach drop, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a physical force. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She had a seizure followed by a heart attack," the detective explained. "It seems the stress of potentially losing her parental rights and learning about the children's transfer to the orphanage triggered the episode. She's been rushed to Memorial Hospital." Keanu closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wall. The night that had already felt endless was stretching on, each new development more challenging than the last. "I'll head there right away," he said, his mind already racing with the implications of this latest turn of events. As he ended the call, Keanu took a moment to collect himself before re-entering the room. The scene that greeted him was marginally calmer than when he'd left. Lila had exhausted herself into a fitful sleep, while June whimpered softly in Rachel's arms. Ethan stood by, his face etched with concern. "I have to go," Keanu said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of the news he carried. "There's been an emergency with the children's mother. She's in the hospital." Lila, it seemed, wasn't as deeply asleep as they'd thought. At the mention of her mother, her eyes flew open, wide and frightened. "Is Mommy okay?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. Keanu knelt beside the bed, meeting Lila's gaze. How does one explain such a situation to a child? He chose his words carefully, trying to balance honesty with reassurance. "Lila, your mum is sick and the doctors are helping her," he explained gently. "I'm going to go check on her, okay?" Lila's lower lip trembled, tears welling up in her eyes once more. "I want to come with you," she pleaded, her small hands reaching out to grasp Keanu's sleeve. "Don't leave me here alone." The desperation in her voice tore at Keanu's heart. He glanced at Rachel, seeking guidance. She gave a small nod of understanding before addressing Lila. "Sweetheart," Rachel began, her voice soft but firm, "I know you're worried about your mum, but the hospital isn't a good place for children right now. The best thing you can do is stay here and rest. Mr. Reeves will go check on your mum and come back to tell you how she's doing." Lila's eyes darted between Keanu and Rachel, uncertainty clear on her face. "You promise?" she asked Keanu, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise," Keanu said solemnly, reaching out to squeeze Lila's hand gently. "I'll come back and tell you everything, and Rachel will stay here with you and June. You won't be alone." After a long moment, Lila nodded hesitantly, her grip on Keanu's sleeve loosening. As he stood to leave, Keanu felt a mix of relief and guilt. He turned to Rachel and Ethan, his voice low. "Thank you both for handling this. I'll be back as soon as I can." With a final glance at the children, Keanu left the room, Ethan escorting him to the front door. As he stepped out into the pre-dawn light, Keanu felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The coming hours would be crucial, not just for Catherine's health, but for the future of this fragile family he had unexpectedly become a part of. As he drove towards the hospital, the night stretched longer, and the darkness felt like it was without ending, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was a new day, Keanu realized, but the challenges of the night were far from over. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for whatever lay ahead, determined to see this through, no matter the cost. The hospital corridors were a maze of sterile white, the harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the soft dawn light outside. Keanu followed a nurse's directions to the intensive care unit, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. As he approached Catherine's room, he spotted two officers stationed outside, deep in conversation with a doctor. "Excuse me," Keanu said as he approached, his voice low and respectful of the hospital's hushed atmosphere. "I'm here about Catherine Holson." The doctor turned, his face etched with the weariness of a long night shift. "Mr. Reeves, I presume. I'm Dr. Patel, the cardiologist overseeing Ms. Holson's care." Keanu nodded, anxiety gnawing at his insides. "How is she?" Dr. Patel's expression was grave as he began to explain. "Ms. Holson suffered a severe cardiac event triggered by emotional trauma. We've managed to stabilize her condition, but she's not out of the woods yet. She'll require immediate surgery for cardiac catheterization and stent placement." The doctor's words washed over Keanu, each one adding to the weight on his shoulders. "Whatever she needs," he said without hesitation, "I'll cover the expenses." Dr. Patel nodded appreciatively. "That's very generous of you, Mr. Reeves. We'll need to conduct a coronary CT scan to evaluate her coronary arteries before proceeding with the surgery." One of the officers stepped forward, his face a mask of professional detachment. "Mr. Reeves, you should be aware that Ms. Holson is still under our custody. We'll need to keep her under surveillance during her hospital stay." Keanu nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of concern and determination. After a moment's hesitation, the officer agreed. Briefly. "She's conscious but very weak." As Keanu entered the room, the sight of Catherine hit him like a physical blow. She lay pale and small in the hospital bed, connected to various machines that beeped and hummed softly. Her eyes fluttered open as he approached, recognition dawning slowly on her face. "My children," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the medical equipment. Keanu moved closer to Catherine's bedside, his voice gentle as he responded. "They're safe, Catherine. They're at Sunnybrook Children's Home. The social worker, Rachel, is with them, and I was there too. They're being well cared for." Tears welled up in Catherine's eyes, a mix of relief and anguish crossing her face. "I don't want to lose them," she said, her voice breaking. "I've made so many mistakes. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Try to stay calm," Keanu urged, mindful of her fragile condition. "Right now you need to focus on getting better. We'll figure everything out, I promise." Catherine's eyes searched his face, confusion evident in her weak voice. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Keanu paused, considering his words carefully. "Sometimes we're put in a position to make a difference. When I saw Lila in that store, I couldn't just walk away. And now I want to see this through, to help you and your children find a better path." As Catherine's eyelids began to droop with exhaustion, Keanu gently squeezed her hand. "Rest now," he said softly. "I'll make sure your children are taken care of, and I'll be here when you wake up." Just as Keanu was about to leave, Catherine's grip on his hand tightened slightly. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes struggling to stay open. "There's something you should know about how we ended up here." Keanu sat back down, giving Catherine his full attention. As she began to speak, her voice grew stronger, as if the act of sharing her story was giving her strength. "It wasn't always like this," she began, her eyes focused on a point beyond the hospital room. "We were happy once, Gerald, the children, and me. Gerald worked at an animal conservation center. He loved his job, and we had such plans for the future." Catherine's voice faltered as she continued. "But then, just a month after June was born, there was an accident. Gerald's conservation van was hit by a drunk truck driver. They went off a bridge into the sea. He drowned along with the animals he was trying to save." Tears streamed down Catherine's face as she recounted the tragedy that had set her life on its current path. Keanu listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of her story. "After that, everything fell apart," Catherine went on. "I was alone with a toddler and a newborn, trying to make ends meet. Then I discovered Gerald had hidden debts. Loan sharks started showing up at our door. We lost our home, our savings, everything." As Catherine's tale unfolded, Keanu began to understand the series of events that had led to their current situation. The loss of her husband, the financial ruin, the desperate choices made in the face of overwhelming circumstances. It all painted a picture of a woman pushed to her limits, making increasingly poor decisions out of sheer desperation. "I'm not trying to excuse what I've done," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I know I've failed my children, but I want to make it right. I want to be the mother they deserve, to have our family back, to make Gerald proud." As Catherine's eyes began to close, exhaustion finally overtaking her, Keanu stood. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Catherine," he said softly. "Get some rest now. We'll talk more when you're feeling stronger." Leaving the room, Keanu felt the weight of Catherine's story settling on his shoulders. The situation was even more complex than he had initially thought, but her revelation had only strengthened his resolve to help this family. As he made his way back to the waiting area, his mind was already racing with plans and possibilities, determined to find a way to give Catherine and her children the second chance they so desperately needed. As Keanu settled into an uncomfortable chair in the hospital waiting room, the weight of Catherine's story pressed heavily upon him. The sterile environment, with its harsh fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smell, seemed at odds with the raw emotion of the tale he had just heard. He closed his eyes, allowing Catherine's words to wash over him once more, piecing together the tragic sequence of events that had led to this moment. In his mind's eye, he could see Catherine as she must have been before, young, hopeful, with a loving husband and a bright future ahead. The image of Gerald, dedicated to his work at the Animal Conservation Center, brought a bittersweet smile to Keanu's face. How quickly life could change, he mused. How swiftly dreams could be shattered. As he sat there, lost in thought, a nurse approached him. "Mr. Reeves?" she said softly, pulling him from his reverie. "Ms. Holson is awake again and asking for you. She says there's more she needs to tell you." Keanu nodded, rising from his chair with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. What more could there be to this already heartbreaking story? As he re-entered Catherine's room, he was struck by how small and vulnerable she looked in the large hospital bed. Her eyes, though tired, were clearer now, filled with a determination that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming back," Catherine said, her voice slightly stronger than it had been earlier. "There's more you need to know. About how things got so bad." Keanu pulled a chair close to her bedside, settling in to listen. Catherine took a deep breath, steeling herself for the difficult tale she was about to share. "After we lost everything," she began, her voice low and filled with shame, "I didn't know where to turn. We were on the streets and I had 2 babies to feed. That's when I started dancing at the club." Keanu listened intently, his face a mask of empathy as Catherine continued her story. "The owner, he let us stay in the spare room upstairs," she said, her eyes fixed on her hands as they twisted the hospital blanket. "I'd work all night, then try to care for the kids during the day. I was so tired and all the time I felt like I was drowning, barely keeping my head above water." Catherine's voice broke as she described her first encounter with Dennis, a male performer at the club. "He seemed so kind at first," she said, her eyes clouding with regret. "He'd watch the kids sometimes, tell me to rest. That's when he first gave me the drugs. He said they'd help me sleep, help me cope with the stress." Keanu felt a chill run down his spine as Catherine described her rapid descent into addiction. The club owner's discovery of their drug use in the spare room led to their expulsion, forcing them to move into Dennis's squalid apartment. "I started leaving the kids alone more and more," Catherine admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I'd tell myself it was just for a little while, that I needed to work to provide for them. But really, I was serving special customers at the club, doing whatever I had to for my next fix." The room fell silent as Catherine's words hung in the air. Keanu struggled to find the right words, to offer some comfort in the face of such raw pain and regret. "Catherine," he said finally, his voice gentle but firm, "what you've been through, it's unimaginable. But you're here now and you're fighting. That's what matters." Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes with a shaky hand. "I want to be better," she whispered, "for Lila and June. They deserve so much more than what I've given them." As they sat there in the quiet hospital room, the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the blinds, casting a soft glow across Catherine's face. In that moment, Keanu saw not just the broken woman before him, but the potential for healing, for redemption. "We're going to get you the help you need," Keanu said, his voice filled with determination. "Rehabilitation, counseling, job training, whatever it takes. But Catherine, you have to be committed, for yourself and for your children." Catherine looked at him, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "I will," she said, her voice stronger now. "I swear I'll do whatever it takes. I want to be someone my children can be proud of, someone Gerald would be proud of." As the conversation turned to the practicalities of Catherine's recovery and the legal challenges ahead, Keanu found himself marveling at the resilience of the human spirit. In the face of unimaginable hardship, here was a woman clinging to hope, fighting for a second chance. Keanu's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Excusing himself, he stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Mr. Reeves," the detective's voice came through clearly, "we need you back at the station immediately. There's been a development with the evidence and we have found the teddy bear you were looking for." Keanu's heart raced, his mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. "I'm on my way," he replied, ending the call and turning back to the room. He explained the situation to Catherine, promising to return as soon as he could, and then made his way out of the hospital. The drive to the police station seemed interminable, each traffic light an eternity of anticipation and worry. The morning rush hour was just beginning, the streets slowly filling with commuters going about their daily routines, oblivious to the drama unfolding in Keanu's world. As he walked through the station doors, he was immediately met by the detective, whose grim expression sent a chill down Keanu's spine. Without a word, the detective led him to a small conference room, gesturing for Keanu to take a seat. "What's happened?" Keanu asked, his voice tense with apprehension. The detective placed a clear evidence bag on the table between them. Inside was Lila's cherished teddy bear, looking worse for wear, its once soft fur matted and dirty. Keanu's heart sank at the sight of it, remembering Lila's desperate plea for her beloved toy. "We've completed our initial examination of the bear," the detective began, his voice grave. "Mr. Reeves, I'm afraid we've discovered something disturbing." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the stuffed toy. "What is it?" "The bear was stuffed with packets of a white substance," the detective explained, his words measured and careful. The room seemed to tilt for a moment as Keanu absorbed this information. He felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. "My God," he breathed, his mind racing. "Does this mean—" "Catherine." The detective held up a hand, his expression softening slightly. "Before we jump to conclusions, we need to consider all the evidence. Can you tell me everything you know about Catherine's situation? Every detail could be crucial." For the next hour, Keanu recounted everything he had learned about Catherine's story, her background as a club dancer, Dennis's influence on her addiction and neglect, and her recent vow to turn her life around. As he spoke, he could see the detective's expression changing, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. As Keanu finished, the detective nodded thoughtfully. "This context is invaluable, Mr. Reeves. It paints a very different picture than what we initially assumed." "Is there any chance Catherine can avoid losing her parental rights?" Keanu asked, hope creeping into his voice despite the gravity of the situation. The detective sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It will ultimately depend on the court's decision, but this information certainly complicates things in her favor. We'll need to investigate further, particularly regarding Dennis's involvement." Keanu leaned forward, an idea forming. "What about fingerprints? Have you checked the bear and the drug packets for prints?" The detective's eyes widened slightly. "That's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Reeves. We'll get on that right away. It could be crucial in determining who was actually responsible for hiding the drugs." As Keanu prepared to leave, he glanced at his watch. It was 4:35 a.m. The weight of exhaustion suddenly hit him, but he knew there was still much to be done. "I promised the children I'd return to the orphanage," he explained to the detective. "Is there anything else you need from me right now?" The detective shook his head. No, you've been incredibly helpful. We'll be in touch as soon as we have more information. And Mr. Reeves, thank you for your involvement in this case. It's clear these children are lucky to have you in their corner. As Keanu left the station, the hint of first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Despite his exhaustion, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The evidence discovery was a setback, but it also opened new avenues of investigation. As he drove towards the orphanage, Keanu found himself hoping that this could be the key to keeping Catherine's family together. The day ahead would be long and challenging, but as he navigated the slowly awakening city streets, Keanu felt a glimmer of hope. Sometimes, he mused, the darkest moments come just before the dawn. And perhaps for Catherine and her children, this new day would bring the first light of a brighter future. The sun had barely risen by the time Keanu arrived at Sunnybrook Children's Home. The morning light cast a warm glow on the old Victorian building, softening its imposing facade. Ethan greeted him at the entrance, concern etched on his face. "They've been asking for you," Ethan said softly, leading Keanu inside. The house was beginning to stir, the sounds of children waking and staff preparing for the day drifting through the halls. The little one's been quite anxious. Keanu nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for his absence. As they entered the private room, he found Lila and June awake, their faces a mix of excitement and worry at his appearance. Lila's hair was tousled from sleep, her eyes wide and questioning. "You came back," Lila exclaimed, rushing to hug his legs. June babbled happily from his crib, reaching out his arms to be picked up. Keanu knelt down, embracing both children. The warmth of their small bodies against him was a stark contrast to the cold, clinical atmosphere of the hospital and police station. "Of course I did," he said gently. "I promised, didn't I?" Rachel emerged from an adjoining room, looking tired but alert. Keanu quickly explained the situation to her, detailing Catherine's condition and the new developments with the evidence. Rachel listened intently, her professional demeanor tempered by genuine concern for the children. "I think it would be good for them to see their mother," Rachel said after a moment's consideration. "It might help ease their anxiety, and if Catherine is facing surgery, well, it's important they have this time together." Keanu agreed, and they began preparing for the hospital visit. As Rachel helped the children get ready, Keanu found himself marveling at their resilience. Despite the upheaval of the past day, Lila and June seemed to be adapting, their innate childish ability to live in the moment a blessing in these circumstances. The drive to the hospital was filled with Lila's excited chatter, punctuated by June's happy babbles. Lila asked countless questions about her mother, her voice tinged with both worry and hope. Keanu answered as best he could, trying to balance honesty with reassurance. At the hospital, a nurse met them outside Catherine's room. Her face was kind but serious as she explained the situation. "Ms. Holson has just come out of surgery," she said. "It was successful, but she'll need to stay for 2-3 days for monitoring and to adjust her medication. She's very weak, so please keep the visit brief." Keanu nodded, turning to the children. "Your mum needs to rest, so we have to be very quiet, okay?" Lila nodded solemnly, while June mimicked the gesture, not fully understanding but eager to please. As they entered the room, the beeping of monitors and the sterile smell of disinfectant filled the air. Catherine lay in the bed, pale but awake. Her face lit up at the sight of her children, though the joy was tempered by the reality of their situation. "My babies," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes as Lila carefully climbed onto the bed to hug her. June squirmed in Rachel's arms, reaching for his mother. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with whispered words of love and reassurance. Catherine held her children close, her eyes meeting Keanu's over their heads, filled with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. As the family reconnected, Keanu's phone buzzed. Excusing himself, he stepped into the hallway to take the call, his heart racing as he saw it was from the detective. "Mr. Reeves," the detective's voice came through, a note of excitement in his tone. "We've got the results from the fingerprint analysis." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. "Go on," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. "Catherine's prints are completely absent from both the bear and the drugs," the detective explained. However, we found Dennis's prints all over them. It appears he had been using the bear to hide his stash, opening and re-sewing it multiple times. Relief washed over Keanu in a powerful wave. "This is good news, isn't it?" he asked, hardly daring to hope. "It certainly helps Catherine's case," the detective confirmed. "When she's well enough to attend court, she'll need to demonstrate her commitment to her children. But this evidence definitely works in her favor." Thanking the detective, Keanu ended the call and took a deep breath before re-entering the room. The scene before him was one of quiet intimacy, Catherine holding her children close, whispering soft words of love and reassurance. The weight of the past 24 hours seemed to hang in the air, but there was also a palpable sense of hope. As Keanu approached, Catherine looked up, her eyes searching his face for news. He shared the information about the teddy bear, watching as relief washed over Catherine's features. Catherine's eyes widened in shock. "The teddy bear," she whispered, her voice trembling. I had no idea. I never even touched it after." She trailed off, her gaze drifting to her children, who were quietly playing in the corner of the room under Rachel's watchful eye. I never touched that bear," Catherine admitted, her voice breaking. "It was too painful. It reminded me so much of Gerald, of our life before." She trailed off, overcome with emotion. Keanu leaned in, his voice low and reassuring. "This actually helps your case, Catherine. It shows you weren't deeply involved in Dennis's drug activities. My lawyer will be available to help you through the legal process. We're on your side." Some tears welled up in Catherine's eyes. "I don't deserve this kindness," she said, her voice barely audible. "After everything I've done—" "Hey," Keanu said gently, placing a hand on her arm. "Everyone deserves a second chance. The important thing now is what you do with it." Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked over at her children, her gaze filled with a mixture of love and determination. "I'm so sorry, Lila, June, for everything that I had done. I failed as your mother, but I promise," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll get clean, find a real job. I want to be someone they can be proud of." Keanu smiled encouragingly. "That's the spirit. It won't be easy, but you won't be alone in this." As they discussed the next steps, rehabilitation, counseling, job training, Lila approached the bed, her small face etched with concern. "Mommy," she asked hesitantly, "are you coming home with us?" Catherine's heart visibly broke at the question. She reached out, pulling Lila close. "Not yet, sweetheart," she explained gently. "Mommy needs to get better first, and there are some grown-up things I need to take care of, but I promise, I'm going to work very hard so we can be together again." Lila's lower lip trembled. "You promise?" "I promise," Catherine said solemnly, looking from Lila to June and back again. "I love you both so much, more than anything in the world." As they discussed the road ahead, Keanu outlined the plans he had set in motion. "I've arranged for you to enter a rehabilitation program once you're released from the hospital," he explained. "It's a good facility with counseling and job training programs, and most importantly, they'll work with you on regaining custody of Lila and June." At the mention of custody, Lila's head snapped up, her eyes wide with worry. "Mommy's not coming home with us?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Catherine reached out, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Not right away, sweetheart," she said softly. "Mommy needs to get better first. But I promise I'm going to work so hard to come back to you and June." Rachel stepped in, her voice calm and reassuring. "Lila, June, you'll be staying at Sunnybrook for a little while longer. It's a nice place, isn't it? And you'll be able to visit your mom regularly while she gets better." Lila nodded slowly, processing this information. "And Mr. Keanu will visit too?" she asked, looking up at him with hope in her eyes. Keanu knelt down to her level, his voice warm and sincere. "Of course I will. I'll be checking in on all of you. We're in this together now, okay?" As the visit drew to a close, Catherine held her children close, whispering promises and words of love. Keanu watched the scene, a bittersweet mixture of hope and sadness washing over him. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was committed to seeing this family through to a better future. As they prepared to leave, Catherine caught Keanu's eye. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "If you hadn't stopped to help Lila that night, I don't know where we'd be." Keanu smiled softly. "Sometimes life puts us in the right place at the right time. The important thing is what we choose to do in those moments." As they left the hospital room, Lila's small hand slipped into Keanu's. He looked down to see her looking up at him with trust and hope in her eyes. In that moment, Keanu knew that his involvement in this family's life was far from over. The sun was getting higher in the sky as they drove back to Sunnybrook, its rays casting a golden glow over the rolling fields and distant hills. The warmth of the morning seeped into the car, a gentle contrast to the emotional weight of the day. Keanu glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Lila and June dozing in their car seats, their faces peaceful despite the challenges they had faced. Rachel broke the comfortable silence. "You know, it's rare to see someone with your influence and resources invest so much heart into a situation like this, spending the entire night and day handling everything. Most wouldn't get nearly as involved." Keanu kept his eyes on the road, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I couldn't just walk away," he said softly, "not when I saw what was happening." As they pulled up to Sunnybrook, the Victorian-style building bathed in the golden afternoon light, Keanu felt a sense of cautious hope settling in his chest. The future still held uncertainties, but progress had been made. Catherine had a second chance with her children. The legal case against Dennis was gaining momentum, and proper support systems were being set up to help the family heal. As Keanu lifted the still sleepy Lila from her car seat, Ethan, the owner of the orphanage, appeared at the front door, his welcoming smile bright in the sunlight. "Welcome back," he greeted warmly, stepping forward. "Don't worry, they'll be safe here. We'll make sure of it." Rachel nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. The children are still tired after the whole night event." Ethan crouched slightly to address Lila and June, his voice gentle. "That's understandable. We have some toys and snacks waiting for them inside once they wake up and feel better. They're going to like it here, I promise." Lila stirred, rubbing her eyes as she woke up and looked at Ethan, then back at Keanu. "We stay here now?" she asked, her voice groggy. Keanu crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just for a little while, sweetheart, as we have discussed with your mother. Ethan will take good care of you. I'll be back soon to check on you, okay?" Lila nodded sleepily, gripping his hand for a moment before letting Ethan guide her and June toward the door. As Keanu and Rachel stood watching the girls disappear inside, Ethan turned back and offered a reassuring nod. "They'll be all right here. You have my word." Keanu exhaled deeply, the weight on his shoulders easing slightly. For now the girls were safe, and the next steps were clear. The sun hung high in the sky, casting its warm afternoon light across the landscape, but Keanu knew this wasn't an ending. It was the start of something better, not just for Catherine, Lila and June, but for himself as well.